I am Catherine, 58 years old. For my entire life, I built an empire with my bare hands. I turned a failing construction company into a billion-dollar real estate development firm. My son always told me I was too controlling, too demanding, that business was no place for a woman with my methods. But the worst betrayal didn't come from a competitor or a board member. It came from him. From Marcus, my only child, the heir I groomed since birth. On a Tuesday morning in September, 2 years ago, I woke up in what I thought was a luxury rehabilitation center. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The windows had bars painted white to look decorative. A nurse smiled at me with pity in her eyes. I was told I was having delusions. That I was a danger to myself. That my own son had me committed for psychiatric evaluation under an emergency court order. I laughed at first. Then I saw the court documents. My signature, forged. Medical reports I never participated in. Testimony from doctors I'd never met. The facility administrator looked at me like I was fragile, broken. She said, "Mrs. Chen, your son loves you very much. He's doing this to protect you." Everyone believed him. The judge. The doctors. The staff. My own lawyers were blocked from seeing me for the first 6 months. Marcus told them I was in Europe, recovering. Then Asia, seeking treatment. Then simply unavailable. They had no idea that the woman they had just locked away was still the majority shareholder of Chen Development Corporation. I owned 51% of the company. I was the only person who could authorize the sale of our crown jewel, the Meridian Project, a $2.3 billion mixed-use development in the heart of downtown. Without my signature, that deal was dead. And Marcus needed that deal to close. He needed it desperately. I am Catherine, 58 years old. For my entire life, I built an empire with my bare hands. I turned a failing construction company into a billion-dollar real estate development firm. My son always told me I was too controlling, too demanding, that business was no place for a woman with my methods. But the worst betrayal didn't come from a competitor or a board member. It came from him. From Marcus, my only child, the heir I groomed since birth. On a Tuesday morning in September, 2 years ago, I woke up in what I thought was a luxury rehabilitation center. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The windows had bars painted white to look decorative. A nurse smiled at me with pity in her eyes. I was told I was having delusions. That I was a danger to myself. That my own son had me committed for psychiatric evaluation under an emergency court order. I laughed at first. Then I saw the court documents. My signature, forged. Medical reports I never participated in. Testimony from doctors I'd never met. The facility administrator looked at me like I was fragile, broken. She said, "Mrs. Chen, your son loves you very much. He's doing this to protect you." Everyone believed him. The judge. The doctors. The staff. My own lawyers were blocked from seeing me for the first 6 months. Marcus told them I was in Europe, recovering. Then Asia, seeking treatment. Then simply unavailable. They had no idea that the woman they had just locked away was still the majority shareholder of Chen Development Corporation. I owned 51% of the company. I was the only person who could authorize the sale of our crown jewel, the Meridian Project, a $2.3 billion mixed-use development in the heart of downtown. Without my signature, that deal was dead. And Marcus needed that deal to close. He needed it desperately. Because the woman whispering in his ear, the woman who orchestrated my imprisonment, needed the commission. His mistress, Elena, the real estate broker who stood to make $46 million when the Meridian sold. She needed me gone just long enough to forge one more signature. They had no idea that I had already filed a protection order on that asset before they locked me up. They had no idea that the day I walked out of that facility, their entire world would collapse. The facility was called Willowbrook Estate. It sat on 40 acres in the countryside, surrounded by manicured gardens and walking paths designed to look therapeutic. The brochure called it a healing sanctuary. I called it a cage. The air inside always smelled the same, industrial floor cleaner trying to mask the scent of despair, mixed with the cafeteria's overcooked vegetables. Everything was beige. Beige walls. Beige furniture. Beige lives being lived by people who had actually lost their minds. I was not one of them. I spent my days in the common room observing. Taking notes in my mind. There were 17 other patients on my floor. Most were medicated into compliance. I refused medication whenever I could, pretending to swallow pills and spitting them into napkins later. I needed my mind sharp. The staff thought I was improving. Cooperative. Accepting my situation. They had no idea I was documenting every procedural violation, every forged signature on my treatment plans, every illegal extension of my hold. 6 months into my captivity, Marcus visited for the first time. He walked into the visiting room wearing one of the suits I bought him, carrying himself like he owned the world. Because in his mind, he did now. He sat across from me at the small table, his cologne overwhelming in the sterile space. Italian leather shoes. New watch, Patek Philippe, probably $80,000. He was spending my money like I was already dead. "Mother," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "You look well. Are they treating you properly?" I stared at him without blinking. I had practiced this look in the mirror of my small bathroom. Calm. Unmoved. Unbroken. "I'm fine, Marcus. When am I going home?" He shifted in his chair. "The doctors say you're making progress, but you're not ready yet. You were having episodes, Mother. You were putting yourself and others at risk." "What episodes?" I asked quietly. "Be specific." He waved his hand dismissively. "You were erratic. Making dangerous business decisions. Threatening people." "Name one person I threatened." His jaw tightened. "This isn't productive. I came here to see how you're doing, not to be interrogated." "You came here to make sure I was still compliant," I said. "To make sure I hadn't figured out what you and Elena did." The color drained from his face. Just for a moment. Then he recovered, putting on a patronizing smile. "Elena has nothing to do with this. She's been supportive during a difficult time. I don't know what paranoid ideas you've developed here, but this is exactly why you need to stay until you're better." A staff member appeared at the door. Dr. Patricia Lowell, the facility director. She was 50-something, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses. She had reviewed my case personally. Marcus stood immediately, shaking her hand like they were old friends. "Dr. Lowell, thank you for taking such good care of my mother." "Of course, Mr. Chen. We're seeing real improvement. Catherine has been very cooperative lately." Marcus smiled at me. Victorious. Smug. "That's wonderful to hear. I've been so worried." Dr. Lowell nodded sympathetically. Then she looked at me, and something shifted in her expression. "Catherine, I need to speak with you privately after this visit. There's been a development with your paperwork." Marcus's smile froze. "What kind of development?" "Nothing to concern yourself with, Mr. Chen. Just routine administrative matters. We'll handle it." She left, and Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Whatever you're trying to do, it won't work. I have legal guardianship. I have power of attorney. Every doctor here has signed off on your treatment. You have no power here, Mother. Accept it." I looked at him, this man I raised, this stranger wearing my son's face. You're right, Marcus. I have no power here. I smiled softly. But you should ask yourself why Dr. Lowell looked nervous when she mentioned my paperwork. He left 10 minutes later, walking fast, pulling out his phone before he even reached his car. After he was gone, Dr. Lowell returned. She sat down where Marcus had been sitting. Mrs. Chen, I've been the director here for 12 years. I've seen families make difficult decisions about their loved ones. But I've also seen something else. She slid a folder across the table. 3 days ago, I received a call from Judge Helen Morrison. She's a family court judge who happened to be reviewing emergency commitments in this county. She found irregularities in your case. Significant irregularities. She opened the folder. Inside were the original commitment papers. These signatures don't match. The timeline doesn't work. The medical evaluations were conducted by doctors who have since had their licenses suspended for falsifying psychiatric reports. Mrs. Chen, I have reason to believe your commitment was not legitimate. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not hope. Not yet. But possibility. What happens now? I asked. Dr. Lowell folded her hands. I've already filed a motion to review your case. Judge Morrison has fast-tracked it. There will be a hearing in 10 days. If what I suspect is true, you'll be released immediately. And Mrs. Chen? She looked at me with something like respect. I've also preserved every document, every visitor log, every communication from your son. If you choose to pursue legal action, you'll have everything you need. I nodded slowly. Thank you, Dr. Lowell. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Your son made substantial donations to this facility. He's on our advisory board as of 6 months ago. He thought that would ensure your continued stay here. But he doesn't understand that some things can't be bought. Justice is one of them. 10 days. I had 10 days before Marcus learned that I was getting out. 10 days before his world fell apart. I returned to my room and did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I smiled. A real smile. Not for the cameras. Not for the staff. For myself. Because I knew exactly what I was going to do the moment I walked out of Willowbrook's gates. My mind drifted back to 3 years before the imprisonment. Marcus was 32. I was 55 and had just closed the Meridian land acquisition, the deal that would define Chen Development's legacy. It was Christmas Eve. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, the tree lights casting golden shadows across the marble floors. I had planned an intimate dinner, just Marcus and me, like we used to do before he got so busy with his vice president responsibilities. I had spent weeks preparing for this night. Not just the dinner, but the gift. The real gift. Marcus arrived late, as usual, checking his phone every few minutes. We sat in the formal dining room, the table set with my mother's china, candles flickering between us. I poured wine. He barely touched it. I have something for you, I said, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. He opened it slowly. Inside were documents transferring 20% of my shares to him, effective immediately. It would make him the second largest shareholder in the company. Real power. A path to eventual leadership when I decided to step back. The shares were worth $340 million. He looked at the papers for a long moment. Then he closed the portfolio and pushed it back toward me. I can't accept this, Mother. I felt my heart constrict. Why not? You've earned it. You've worked alongside me for 8 years. This is your legacy. Because it comes with strings, he said quietly. It always does with you. You'll use this to control me even more than you already do. Every decision I make, you'll remind me that you gave me this. That you can take it away. Marcus, that's not, it is, Mother. It's exactly what you do. You did it with my education. You did it with my position in the company. You do it with everything. I don't want gifts that come with invisible leashes. The words hit me like physical blows. I stood up, needing distance, and walked to the window. Outside, snow had started to fall. I'm trying to secure your future, I said. No, he replied. You're trying to secure your control over my future. There's a difference. I turned back to face him. Then what do you want, Marcus? He stood, pulling out his own envelope from his jacket pocket. I've been offered a position. CEO of Hartman Realty Group. They're smaller than Chen Development, but they're growing fast. And they want me to lead without someone looking over my shoulder every second. I felt the floor shift beneath me. You're leaving the company? I'm leaving you, he said. Not angry. Sad. I need to build something that's mine. Not yours. Not ours. Mine. He placed his envelope on the table. Inside, I would later discover, was his formal resignation, effective January 1st. But before I could respond, the door opened. Elena walked in. I had met her twice before, briefly. She was Marcus's girlfriend, or so I thought. Tall, polished, with the kind of beauty that comes from expensive maintenance. She worked for Hartman Realty Group as their senior broker. Now, suddenly, her presence made sense. She had orchestrated this. The job offer. The resignation. Everything. I'm sorry to interrupt, Elena said, though she didn't look sorry at all. Marcus asked me to pick him up. We have another dinner to get to. Another dinner. On Christmas Eve. I looked at my son. You're leaving? Now? We have plans with Elena's family, he said, not meeting my eyes. They're expecting us. Elena walked over to Marcus, took his hand, and then looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for understanding, Mrs. Chen. Family is so important during the holidays. She emphasized the word family like she was already part of his and I was being relegated to something else. Something less. Marcus picked up his resignation letter, leaving the share transfer documents on the table. As they walked toward the door, Elena paused by the sideboard where I had placed a small wrapped gift for Marcus. A photo book I had made chronicling our years building the company together. Hundreds of photos. Memories. She picked it up, felt its weight, and set it back down without comment. From her designer handbag, she pulled out a small gift bag and handed it to Marcus. Almost forgot, she said cheerfully. My gift to you. Open it later. Marcus took it, kissed her cheek, and they left together. I heard his car start in the driveway. Heard them drive away. I stood in that dining room for 20 minutes before I could move. Then I walked over to the gift bag Elena had given Marcus. He'd left it on the entry table. I looked inside. A keychain. A cheap metal keychain with "World's Best Boss" engraved on it. Probably $15. Maybe less. Next to it sat my leather portfolio. Documents worth $340 million. Untouched. Rejected. I walked to the powder room off the hallway and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup was perfect. My hair was perfect. My dress was perfect. Everything about me looked exactly as I had planned for this evening. But my eyes looked hollow. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. He doesn't know what he's done, I whispered to my reflection. None of them know what's coming. I didn't cry. I had learned a long time ago that tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I made a vow. I would never again offer Marcus something he could reject. I would never again put myself in a position where someone like Elena could walk into my home and make me feel small. I returned to the dining room, gathered up the share transfer documents, and locked them in my safe. Then I sat down at the head of the table and finished my wine alone. The candles burned down to nothing. The food went cold. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering everything in white. They had no idea what was coming. But I did. Because in that moment, I stopped being Marcus's mother and started being something else. A strategist. A chess player. Someone who understood that the game had changed, and I needed to change with it. Marcus went to work for Hartman Realty Group. Elena became his constant companion. And I went back to work at Chen Development, building the Meridian project into something so valuable that eventually, inevitably, they would come back. They would need me. And when they did, I would be ready. This is the moment where I felt something break inside me. If you are listening to this and you have ever been the one who was overlooked, the one whose love was not enough no matter what you offered, I need you to know, you are not alone. Please hit that like button right now to show we are stronger than their rejection. And in the comments, I want you to simply write, I am worthy. Let's create a wall of support for everyone who has ever had their $340 million gift rejected while someone else's $15 keychain was treasured. 6 months after that Christmas, Marcus married Elena in a private ceremony. I found out from a social media post. They didn't invite me. The post showed them on a beach in Santorini, Elena's ring catching the Mediterranean sun. The caption read, "Starting our forever with the people who matter most." I was not among those people. 2 weeks later, Marcus returned to Chen Development. Not as an employee. As a problem. Hartman Realty Group had imploded. The CEO who recruited Marcus was indicted for securities fraud. The company filed for bankruptcy. Marcus lost his position, his salary, and his reputation. He came to my office on a Thursday afternoon, his confidence shattered. I made a mistake, he said, standing in my doorway like a supplicant. I need to come back. I looked at him for a long moment. Part of me, the part that was still his mother, wanted to say yes immediately. To forgive him. To welcome him home. But another part of me, the part that had spent 6 months hardening in the wake of his rejection, remembered the keychain. Remembered Elena's smirk. Remembered Christmas Eve. You can come back, I said finally. Same position. Same salary. But Marcus, understand this, you don't get the shares. You don't get the succession plan. You work for me now, not with me. Those are the terms. His jaw tightened. Mother, I said I made a mistake. I'm trying to, and I'm giving you a second chance, I interrupted. But there are consequences to choices. You chose to leave. You chose Elena over this company. Over me. Now you live with those consequences. He took the job. He had no choice. But the resentment festered. I could see it in the way he looked at me during meetings. The way he spoke to me in clipped, professional tones. Elena, now his wife, made it worse. She had landed at a boutique real estate firm after Hartman collapsed, and she was hungry. Ambitious. She saw the Meridian project and understood its potential. A $2.3 billion sale. Her 2% commission would be $46 million. Enough to set them up for life. Enough to make Marcus independent of me forever. She started working on him. I could see it happening. Subtle comments at family dinners I was occasionally invited to. Your mother doesn't trust you. She's holding you back. You built that project as much as she did. You deserve more. The breaking point came 14 months after Marcus returned. I announced in a board meeting that I was restructuring the company's ownership. The 20% I had once offered Marcus would now be placed in a trust for future leadership, to be distributed based on merit and performance over a 10-year period. It was a reasonable plan. Fair. Based on results, not relationships. Marcus exploded. Right there in the boardroom, in front of 12 board members and executives. "You're punishing me," he shouted. "This is because I left. Because I chose my own path. You can't stand that I didn't need you." "This is about protecting the company," I replied calmly. "Not about you." "Everything is about me," he yelled. "I'm your only child. Your only heir. And you're treating me like an employee." "You are an employee, Marcus. You chose that when you resigned." He stormed out of the meeting. Later that day, I received a call from Elena. She was crying. Marcus had been in a car accident. Minor, no serious injuries, but he was shaken. "He's under so much stress because of you," Elena sobbed into the phone. "He can't take this anymore. The pressure. The control. Something has to change, Catherine, or I'm afraid of what might happen to him." It was a threat. I recognized it immediately. But I didn't respond to threats with capitulation. I responded with action. I called Marcus and told him to take a month off. Paid leave. Time to recover. Time to think. "But Mother, the Meridian deal is closing in 6 weeks. I need to be here I'll handle the Meridian," I said. "You need rest." He agreed reluctantly. That month was when they did it. When Elena found the doctors. When Marcus signed the commitment papers. When they orchestrated the lie that would put me in Willowbrook. I didn't see it coming. I thought I was being compassionate, giving my son space to heal. Instead, I was giving him the opportunity to betray me completely. The day they took me, I was at home in my study, reviewing contracts. 2 police officers arrived with a court order. Marcus was with them, his face a mask of fake concern. "Mother, you've been having episodes. We're taking you somewhere you can get help." I laughed at first. "Episodes? Marcus, what are you talking about?" "The paranoid emails you've been sending," he said. "The threats against board members. The erratic behavior." I had sent no such emails. Made no such threats. But when they showed me the evidence, there it was. Messages from my company email account, full of unhinged conspiracy theories and threats. Someone had hacked my account. Someone had built a false narrative. Someone had been very, very thorough. At Willowbrook, I spent the first 3 months in shock. Then anger. Then something colder. More calculating. I used the facility's computers during approved times to research. To learn. I discovered that Marcus had been appointed my legal guardian through an emergency hearing I never attended. That he had power of attorney over my medical decisions. That he had control of my voting shares through a temporary medical incapacity clause. But he didn't have everything. The 51% I owned directly was protected by a series of legal structures I had built over decades. Trusts within trusts. Clauses that prevented anyone, including a guardian, from exercising those votes without my explicit, in-person consent, verified by my personal attorney, witnessed by a notary I had retained for 20 years. Marcus and Elena didn't understand the depth of protections I had built. They thought guardianship was enough. It wasn't. The Meridian deal stalled. Without my signature, the sale couldn't close. I watched from inside Willowbrook as Marcus scrambled, trying to find loopholes. Elena grew desperate. The buyer threatened to walk away. Marcus visited me repeatedly, each time more aggressive, trying to convince me to sign. I refused. Not out of spite. Out of principle. I would not be coerced. That's when Elena made her fatal mistake. She visited me without Marcus, thinking she could manipulate me woman to woman. She sat in the visiting room wearing a white suit, like she was attending a gallery opening, not visiting a psychiatric facility. "Catherine," she said, voice dripping with false warmth, "I know we've had our differences. But Marcus is suffering. This deal would change everything for him. For us. For our future children." I looked at her with the same calm I had practiced. "Elena, do you know why I built Chen Development?" She blinked, confused by the question. "Because you're ambitious?" "Because my father told me women couldn't succeed in construction. My husband told me to stay home and be a proper wife. Every man I met told me I was in the wrong place. So I built something they couldn't take from me. Something that was mine." I leaned forward slightly. "And now my son, with your encouragement, has tried to take it anyway. Do you really think I'm going to sign those papers?" Her mask slipped. "Just for a moment." "You're a bitter old woman who can't let go of control," she hissed. "Marcus deserves better than you." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But you know what Marcus doesn't deserve? Someone who locks up his mother to steal her company." She left furious. 2 days later, Dr. Lowell called me in to tell me about Judge Morrison's investigation. 1 week after that, I was in court, standing before the judge as she reviewed the fraudulent commitment papers. Marcus and Elena sat in the back of the courtroom, their faces pale. The judge ruled in my favor. The commitment was declared invalid. I was released immediately. I walked out of that courthouse into the afternoon sun. I had been imprisoned for 2 years. 730 days. I had lost time I would never get back. But I had gained something else. Clarity. Purpose. And a complete understanding of exactly who Marcus and Elena were. My lawyer, Thomas, who had finally gotten access to me, stood by the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Chen, what do you want to do first?" I looked at him. "I want to go to the office. We have a company to protect and a son to remove from it." In that order. My first day back at Chen Development, I arrived at 6 a.m. The building was quiet, only security guards and early janitorial staff present. I used my biometric access, which apparently no one had thought to revoke during my imprisonment. The system recognized my fingerprint. The elevator opened. I rode to the top floor, to my office that had been locked for 2 years. Everything was as I left it. My desk. My files. My view of the city skyline. Except someone had changed the nameplate on the door. It now read Marcus Chen, Executive Vice President. My old title, CEO, had been temporarily assumed by Gerald Chiu, the board chairman, during my absence. But Marcus had moved into my office. Into my space. Like he was already running things. I sat in my chair, the leather still remembering my shape, and began making calls. First to Thomas, my attorney. "I want a complete audit of every decision made in my absence. Every contract signed. Every vote taken. Every financial transaction. I want to know exactly what Marcus and the board did while I was gone." "Already started," Thomas replied. "There are some concerning items we need to discuss." Next, I called Gerald. He answered immediately. "Catherine. My God, we just heard. Are you truly all right?" "I'm fine, Gerald. I need an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. "Of course. Catherine, I want you to know, if I had any idea that your commitment wasn't legitimate, we'll discuss it tomorrow," I said, cutting him off. I didn't trust anyone yet. Not even Gerald, who had known me for 20 years. Then I called my operations team. My finance director. My legal counsel. One by one, I pulled my people back into formation. By 8 a.m., when the office started filling with employees, word had already spread. Catherine Chen was back. The energy in the building shifted. Some people were relieved. Others were nervous. Marcus, I knew, would be terrified. He arrived at 9:30 a.m., later than he should have been. He walked toward my office, then stopped when he saw me through the glass walls, sitting at my desk, working as if I had never left. His face went through a series of expressions. Shock. Fear. Then calculation. He knocked on the door frame. Mother. I didn't know you were being released so soon. The commitment was fraudulent, Marcus. I wasn't released. I was exonerated. I didn't look up from my computer. We need to talk, he said. We do. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll talk then. Mother, please, I can explain, tomorrow, Marcus. I looked up at him then, and whatever he saw in my face made him stop talking. He nodded and backed away, pulling out his phone as he walked toward the elevator. Calling Elena, no doubt. The board meeting was a bloodbath. I arrived with Thomas and 3 additional attorneys. I also brought Sharon Webb, a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud. The board members filed in, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to guilty. They all knew. They might not have known the commitment was fraudulent, but they knew something was wrong. And they had done nothing. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming on short notice. I'm sure you have questions about my absence and return. I'll address them briefly, then we'll move on to more pressing matters. I was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility based on fraudulent medical reports and forged documents. The commitment has been overturned. I'm considering legal action against everyone involved. That includes potential charges against anyone who knowingly participated in or benefited from my illegal detention. The room went silent. Marcus, sitting at the far end of the table, looked like he might be sick. Now, I continued, I've had my team conduct a comprehensive audit of all corporate activities during my absence. Sharon, please present your findings. Sharon stood, remote control in hand, and brought up the first slide on the conference room screen. It showed a series of financial transfers. During Mrs. Chen's incapacity, several unusual transactions occurred. First, $8.3 million in company funds were transferred to consultants and advisory firms. Upon investigation, these firms are shell companies with no actual employees or service history. The funds were then distributed to personal accounts belonging to Marcus Chen and Elena Rivera Chen. Gasps around the table. Marcus stood up. Those were legitimate business expenses. Sit down, Marcus, I said quietly. He sat. Sharon continued. Second, the company entered into a contract with Rivera Real Estate Partners, Elena Chen's firm, giving them exclusive brokerage rights to the Meridian project. This contract was signed without full board approval and included unusual terms, specifically a 2% commission instead of the standard 1% for a project of this size. The difference would amount to an additional $23 million in commission fees. More murmurs. Board members were looking at Marcus with expressions ranging from anger to betrayal. Third, Sharon went on, there were 3 attempts to execute the Meridian sale without Mrs. Chen's signature. Each attempt involved forged documents claiming power of attorney. All 3 attempts were rejected by the buyer's legal team. The final attempt, made 3 weeks ago, came very close to succeeding and would have resulted in the largest fraudulent real estate transaction in state history. I let that sink in. Then I spoke. Marcus, do you have anything to say? He looked at Elena, who was sitting in the visitor chairs along the wall. She was staring at her phone, her face pale. Mother, I can explain all of this. The consultants were real. The brokerage contract was a good deal. And the power of attorney, I was advised by lawyers that it was legitimate given your medical state. My medical state that was fabricated, I said. Based on reports from doctors who have since lost their licenses. Based on emails I never sent, from an account that was hacked. Marcus, you didn't just make business mistakes. You committed fraud. Multiple counts. And you did it to steal from me. I'm your son, he shouted. This company should be mine anyway. You were going to give it to me, then you changed your mind because I didn't worship at your feet every second. I was taking what was rightfully yours. I interrupted. You have a right to nothing, Marcus. Everything you have, you were given. And you responded by having me imprisoned. Gerald cleared his throat. Catherine, what do you want to do? I looked around the table. First, Marcus is terminated immediately. All positions, all access, all authority. Security will escort him from the building within the hour. Second, the brokerage contract with Rivera Real Estate Partners is void. We'll find a new broker for the Meridian. Third, I'm filing criminal charges against Marcus for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Fourth, I'm pursuing civil action to recover all stolen funds plus damages. Mother, please, Marcus started. And fifth, I continued, I'm removing myself from the line of fire. Effective immediately, I'm transferring my CEO responsibilities to Gerald for the next 6 months while I focus on the legal battles ahead. I'll retain my board seat and my shares, but I need someone I trust running operations. Gerald nodded. I'll do it. I looked at Marcus. Security will be here in 3 minutes. I suggest you use that time to think about whether you want to make this harder on yourself than it already is. Elena stood up. This is insane. You're punishing Marcus for trying to keep the company running while you were incapacitated. He saved this company. I turned to her. Ms. Chen, you are not an employee of this company. You are not a board member. You are a vendor whose contract has been terminated. If you're not out of this building in 60 seconds, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. She looked at Marcus, expecting him to defend her. He said nothing. He was staring at the table, his world collapsing around him. Elena grabbed her bag and left, her heels clicking furiously down the hallway. Security arrived. 2 guards I had worked with for 15 years. They looked at me, and I nodded. They approached Marcus. Son, I said, using the word deliberately, you had a choice. Every step of the way, you had a choice. You chose Elena. You chose money. You chose to betray me in the most fundamental way possible. Now you get to live with those choices. He stood slowly, the security guards on either side of him. You'll regret this, he said, his voice shaking. You're destroying your own family. No, Marcus. You did that 2 years ago. I'm just making it official. They escorted him out. The board members sat in stunned silence. Catherine, one of them finally said, what happens to the Meridian now? I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd felt in years. The Meridian is about to become the most successful project in this company's history. And Marcus and Elena won't see a penny of it. This right here, this is the moment that makes your blood boil. We have all met someone like Marcus and Elena. Someone who sets the house on fire and then blames you for the smoke. It is the ultimate form of gaslighting. If you have ever had to deal with a toxic person who refuses to take responsibility for the damage they cause, I need you to hit that like button right now. Let's show them that we see through their lies. And in the comments, I want you to type one word, accountability. Let's demand it. The legal battle took 4 months. Marcus hired expensive attorneys, using money I later learned he had borrowed against assets he didn't actually own. Elena stopped showing up to court after the first hearing, when the prosecutor outlined potential charges against her as a co-conspirator. She filed for divorce from Marcus 6 weeks into the trial. Apparently, loyalty wasn't her strong suit when the money disappeared. The evidence was overwhelming. Sharon's forensic accounting revealed not just the $8.3 million in shell company transfers, but another $4.2 million in fraudulent expenses. The emails used to justify my commitment were traced back to an IP address at Elena's office. The doctors who signed my psychiatric evaluation had been paid $50,000 each, funds that came from one of Marcus's shell companies. It was amateur hour, but it had almost worked. Almost. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the front row of the gallery, watching Marcus try to explain away the unexplainable. His attorneys argued diminished capacity due to stress. They argued that he genuinely believed I was mentally ill. They argued that the financial transfers were misunderstandings, not theft. The jury didn't buy any of it. On a Friday afternoon in March, the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Fraud. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. Falsifying documents. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Marcus sat at the defense table, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit looking suddenly cheap on him. His attorneys whispered urgently in his ears, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at nothing, the weight of what he had done finally crushing him. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. This man, this criminal sitting 20 feet away, was still my son. The boy I raised. The child I had dreamed would carry on my legacy. Instead, he had tried to bury me alive to steal it. Sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was packed. Media had caught wind of the story. "Real estate heiress imprisoned by son" was the headline that ran in every major paper. Marcus's attorneys made their final plea for leniency. They talked about his previously clean record, his contributions to the business community, his mental state, his youth. The prosecutor stood up and said simply, "Your Honor, the defendant imprisoned his own mother for 2 years to steal her company. He showed no remorse until he was caught. He deserves the maximum sentence allowed by law." The judge, a woman in her 60s named Sandra Ortiz, looked at Marcus for a long moment. "Mr. Chen, I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've seen many kinds of criminals. But what you did to your mother goes beyond ordinary greed. You betrayed the person who gave you life, who built something extraordinary and tried to share it with you. Instead of gratitude, you responded with cruelty. Instead of patience, you responded with crime. The court sentences you to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 7 years." The courtroom erupted. Marcus's attorneys immediately began shouting about appeals. Marcus himself seemed to fold in on himself, his face in his hands. The bailiffs approached to take him into custody. As they placed handcuffs on his wrists, Marcus looked back at me. Our eyes met. I expected anger, defiance. Instead, I saw something that looked like a child who had just realized he'd made a mistake so enormous that it could never be undone. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. No sound. Just the shape of the words. I nodded once. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. Then the bailiffs led him away through the side door, and he was gone. The civil case was simpler. With the criminal conviction in hand, Marcus had no defense. The court ordered him to repay every stolen dollar, plus damages, plus my legal fees. The total came to $18.7 million. He had maybe $400,000 in remaining assets. The rest would be a debt he'd carry for the rest of his life. Elena's case was messier. She had fled to Singapore before charges could be filed, using connections from her real estate work to disappear. Interpol had a warrant out for her arrest, but she was careful. She would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, unable to return home, unable to practice real estate in any reputable market. She had traded a $46 million payday for permanent exile. It seemed like a fair trade to me. The Meridian project closed 3 months after Marcus's conviction. We found a new broker, a reputable firm with 30 years of history. The sale went through smoothly. $2.3 billion, exactly as projected. Chen Development netted $890 million after costs. It was the largest deal in company history. The board threw a celebration dinner. They invited me as guest of honor. I declined. I was tired of celebrations that felt hollow. Instead, I went to Willowbrook Estate. Dr. Lowell had invited me to speak to the staff about what happened, about the importance of scrutinizing commitment orders, about protecting vulnerable patients. I stood in the same common room where I had spent 2 years of my life and looked at the familiar beige walls. Some of you knew me as a patient, I told the assembled staff. You saw me every day. You probably thought I belonged here. That's because my son and his wife were very good at creating a believable lie. But I need you to understand something. For every real patient who needs help, there might be someone like me. Someone who is here because it's convenient for someone else. Your job is to question everything. To verify everything. To protect everyone. Not just from themselves, but from the people who claim to love them. After the talk, I walked the grounds one last time. The gardens were beautiful in late spring, full of flowers I had never gotten to see properly during my captivity. I had been too angry then. Too focused on survival. Now I could actually see them. Tulips. Daffodils. Cherry blossoms. I sat on a bench near the fountain and called Thomas. The money from the Meridian, I said. I want to establish something with part of it. What kind of something? A legal defense fund. For people who've been wrongfully committed. For families fighting guardianship abuse. I want to call it the Willowbrook Justice Project. $50 million endowment to start. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Catherine, that's extraordinarily generous. It's not generous, I replied. It's necessary. I had resources. I had a paper trail. I had Dr. Lowell. Most people have none of that. They just disappear into places like this and nobody questions it. I'll draw up the paperwork, Thomas said. I hung up and sat there a while longer, watching the fountain, listening to the water. A staff member approached cautiously. It was one of the nurses who had been kind to me during my stay, a young woman named Jennifer. Mrs. Chen? I just wanted to say thank you. For what you said in there. And for coming back. Most people would never want to see this place again. I looked up at her. Jennifer, do you remember what you told me on my first day here? She thought for a moment. I don't think I remember. You said, you're safe here. We'll take care of you. You meant it. I could tell. That kindness mattered more than you know. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry for what happened to you. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. You did your job with compassion. That's all anyone can do. I left Willowbrook that afternoon and never went back. But I made sure the Justice Project was operational within 6 months. In its first year, it helped 43 people fight wrongful commitments. 12 of them won their freedom. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. As for Marcus, he was transferred to a medium security facility upstate. I received letters from him, at first weekly, then monthly, then less frequently. I read the first few. They were full of apologies, explanations, and justifications in equal measure. He was sorry. But also, he had been under so much pressure. Elena had manipulated him. I had pushed him away. It was always someone else's fault, even in his remorse. I stopped opening the letters after the sixth one. They all said the same thing. I'm sorry, but it wasn't really my fault. I kept them, though. Filed in a box in my study. Not archived. Not yet. Just filed. Evidence of who my son had become. Evidence of what I had lost. One evening, about 6 months after the sentencing, I was working late in my office when my assistant buzzed me. Mrs. Chen, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Her name is Diana Martinez. I didn't recognize the name. Did she say what this is about? She says she's Marcus's former girlfriend. From before he met Elena. I was quiet for a moment, then said, send her in. Diana Martinez was in her early 30s, professionally dressed, carrying herself with quiet confidence. She had kind eyes and a nervous smile. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Ms. Martinez. I'm sorry, but I don't believe we've met. We haven't, she said. I dated Marcus 6 years ago, before he met Elena. Before everything fell apart. I see. What can I do for you? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I've been following your case in the news. The trial. Everything. And I needed to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was scared. She opened the folder and slid it across to me. Inside were screenshots of text messages between Marcus and Elena, dated from 7 years ago. Long before Marcus left Chen Development. Long before our Christmas Eve confrontation. I read through them slowly. They outlined a plan. Elena would seduce Marcus. Marcus would get promised shares or control of the company. They would push me out or wait for me to die. Then they would sell everything and split the proceeds. It was all there, in writing, in their own words. Where did you get these? I asked quietly. Marcus sent them to me by accident, Diana said. He meant to send them to a friend, asking for advice on whether to go through with it. When I saw what he was planning, I broke up with him immediately. I told him he was making a terrible mistake. He called me dramatic and paranoid. A week later, he met Elena at some industry event. After that, everything you know happened. I looked at the messages again. Why didn't you come forward during the trial? Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid Marcus would retaliate. Afraid Elena would come after me. Afraid no one would believe me. But then I watched you testify. I watched you sit in that courtroom every single day, facing down your own son. And I realized that if you could be that brave, the least I could do was tell you the truth. It was premeditated, Mrs. Chen. All of it. From the very beginning. I sat back in my chair. Part of me had known this. Suspected it. But seeing it in writing, seeing proof that my son had planned my destruction years in advance, it hit differently. Thank you for bringing this to me, I said finally. It changes nothing legally. Marcus is already in prison. But it helps me understand. Diana nodded. I also wanted to tell you something else. The Marcus I dated, before all this, he was different. He talked about you constantly. About how brilliant you were. How hard you worked. How much he admired you. I think somewhere along the way, that admiration turned into resentment. Maybe because he felt like he could never measure up. Maybe because Elena got into his head. But there was a time when he genuinely loved you. I felt something crack in my chest. That makes it worse, doesn't it? That he loved me and did this anyway. Maybe, Diana said softly. Or maybe it means that the person who hurt you isn't really your son anymore. Maybe he's someone else now. Someone his choices turned him into. She stood to leave. I don't expect anything from you, Mrs. Chen. I just needed you to know the truth. All of it. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at those text messages. Marcus had been planning this for 7 years. 7 years of pretending. Of lying. Of waiting for his moment. The imprisonment wasn't a desperate act. It was the endgame of a long con. I picked up my phone and called Dr. Lowell. Patricia, this is Catherine Chen. I have a question. In your professional opinion, can someone plan something terrible years in advance and still claim it was done in a moment of weakness or mental distress? She was quiet for a moment. Clinically? No. Premeditation indicates capacity, awareness, and intent. It's the opposite of diminished capacity. Why do you ask? Because I just learned my son's betrayal was 7 years in the making. And I need to understand if the person I thought I knew ever really existed. Catherine, Dr. Lowell said gently, the person you thought you knew probably did exist. But people change. Sometimes they change into someone unrecognizable. That's not your failure. It's his. I hung up and looked at the city lights through my window. Somewhere out there, Marcus was in a cell, probably still telling himself he had no choice. That I drove him to it. That it was everyone's fault but his own. And maybe he even believed it. But I knew the truth now. All of it. And the truth was this: my son had made a choice to destroy me, years before I gave him any reason to. He had chosen greed over love. He had chosen Elena over me. And he had chosen to become someone I no longer recognized. The person I mourned wasn't in prison. The person I mourned had disappeared 7 years ago, replaced by someone wearing his face. 3 months after Diana's visit, I received a call I had been dreading. It was from a corrections officer at Marcus's facility. Mrs. Chen, this is Officer Rodriguez from Aldridge Correctional. Your son asked me to contact you. He's been placed in the medical wing. My heart stopped. What happened? He was assaulted by another inmate. He's stable now, but he's asking for you. Says it's urgent. I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself he didn't deserve my presence. I told myself that I had already given him more than he had earned. But he was still my son. Some bonds don't break cleanly, no matter how much you want them to. I drove upstate the next morning, the 3-hour drive giving me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say. How I would maintain my boundaries. How I would stay strong. The prison visiting area for the medical wing was different from standard visitation. Smaller. More private. A guard led me to a room where Marcus sat in a plastic chair, his left arm in a sling, a bandage on his forehead, his face swollen on one side. He looked smaller than I remembered. Prison had eroded him physically. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine fear. Mother. You came. His voice was hoarse. The officer said you were hurt. I sat down across from him, maintaining distance. How bad is it? Broken arm. Concussion. Some bruised ribs. I'll recover. He tried to smile. It came out wrong. You should see the other guy. I didn't return the smile. Why did you ask me here, Marcus? He looked down at his hands, the good one and the one in the sling. Because I need your help. I'm not safe here, Mother. There are people who know who I am. What I did. They target me. They say I'm a rich kid who hurt his mother. They say I deserve whatever happens to me. I need you to talk to your lawyers. To get me transferred to a different facility. Somewhere safer. I sat very still, processing his words. After everything he had done, after 2 years of imprisonment, after stealing from me, after planning my destruction for 7 years, he was asking me to save him. The audacity was almost impressive. Marcus, do you understand what you're asking me? I'm asking you to help your son, he said, his voice rising with desperation. I'm asking you to be my mother. You're asking me to use my power and my resources to make your life more comfortable after you used your power and resources to destroy mine. He flinched. I know what I did was wrong. I've had time to think about it. Every day in here, I think about it. But mother, I'm being punished. Isn't that enough? Do I have to be beaten? Do I have to live in fear every day? I lived in fear every day for 2 years, I said quietly. In a place I didn't belong, surrounded by people who thought I was insane. You put me there, Marcus. You and Elena planned it for years. His face paled. You know about that? Diana Martinez came to see me. She showed me everything. He closed his eyes. That was a long time ago. I was different then. Elena got into my head. She made me think. No, I interrupted. You don't get to blame Elena. You made choices. Active choices. You chose to plan this. You chose to execute it. You chose to look me in the eye while I was imprisoned and pretend you were the concerned son. Every single step, you chose this. I was angry, he shouted. You never thought I was good enough. You dangled that 20% in front of me, then ripped it away because I wanted independence. You made me feel like I would never measure up. Like I would always be under your thumb. I let him finish. Then I spoke, my voice calm. Marcus, I offered you $340 million worth of shares. You rejected them because they came with expectations. You wanted the money without the work. The power without the responsibility. And when you realized you couldn't manipulate me into giving you everything unconditionally, you decided to take it by force. That's not, it is exactly what happened, I said. And now you want me to bail you out again. To use my influence to move you to a nicer prison. To make your consequences more comfortable. Do you hear yourself? He was crying now, tears running down his bruised face. I'm your son. I'm your only child. Doesn't that mean anything anymore? I felt something shift inside me. A letting go. A release of something I had been holding on to without realizing it. It means everything, Marcus. That's why this hurts so much. Because you are my son, and you tried to bury me alive. Not metaphorically. Actually. You locked me in a psychiatric facility and threw away the key. You stole from the company I built. You planned to erase me from my own life. And now you're asking me to forgive all of that because you're uncomfortable. I'm asking you to help me survive. You're asking me to enable you, I corrected. To teach you that there are no real consequences for your actions because mommy will always fix it. That's what got us here, Marcus. I spent your whole life fixing things for you. Cleaning up your mistakes. Smoothing your path. I thought I was helping you. I was actually crippling you. He stared at me, something like understanding dawning in his eyes. So you're just going to leave me here? To suffer? I'm going to let you experience the natural consequences of your choices, I said. The judge gave you 15 years. You'll serve your time like every other prisoner. You'll learn to navigate your circumstances. You'll learn to be resourceful. Maybe you'll learn to be someone different than who you are right now. Or maybe you won't. But either way, it won't be because I intervened. I stood up. Marcus reached out with his good arm, like he wanted to grab my hand, then thought better of it. If you walk out that door, I'll have no one. Elena left. My friends won't visit. You're all I have left. Then you have no one, I said. That's what happens when you burn every bridge in your life. You end up alone. Mother, please, do not contact me again unless you have something genuine to say, I interrupted. Not apologies with conditions. Not excuses. Not requests. If you ever want to have a real conversation about what you did, about genuine accountability and genuine change, my attorney has my contact information. Until then, Marcus, I need you to leave me alone. I walked to the door. The guard was waiting to let me out. Before I left, I turned back one more time. Marcus was still sitting there, tears on his face, looking lost. I'm sorry I couldn't be the mother you needed, I said. And I'm sorry you couldn't be the son I raised. But we both have to live with who we actually are now. Not who we wished we were. I left the prison and drove home. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I felt something quieter. Something like acceptance. When I got back to my office the next day, there was a message from Marcus's attorney asking if I would consider filing a motion for facility transfer. I wrote back one sentence, no. My son needs to serve his sentence where he is. Then I archived the email. Not deleted. Archived. It existed, but it had no power over me. 1 year later, I sold Chen Development. Not to Marcus. Not to anyone connected to him. To a consortium of international investors who promised to maintain the company's values and keep its leadership team intact. The sale netted me $1.8 billion after taxes. I kept enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. The rest, I divided into 3 parts. 1/3 went to the Willowbrook Justice Project. 1/3 went to a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs in construction and real estate. And 1/3 went into a trust for Marcus, to be released only if he completed his entire sentence without further incident, attended every available rehabilitation program, and provided evidence of genuine personal growth through therapy and education. The trust terms were clear: the money was his if he did the work. Not if he manipulated. Not if he complained. If he actually changed. It would be his test. His choice. His chance to prove he could become someone different. I would never know if he succeeded. The trust was set up to operate after my death, administered by independent trustees who had never met Marcus and had no reason to favor him. If he transformed himself, he would be rewarded. If he didn't, the money would go to charity. It was the last thing I could do as his mother. Give him a reason to grow without rescuing him from his consequences. I moved out of the city the following spring. I bought a house on the coast, something small and modern with large windows overlooking the ocean. I furnished it with things I actually liked, not things that impressed visitors. I planted a garden. I learned to paint, badly, but with enthusiasm. I volunteered with local business development programs, mentoring young women who wanted to build their own companies. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious. I traveled when I wanted. I read books that had been on my list for decades. I learned what it felt like to wake up without agenda, without armor, without the constant vigilance that had defined my life for so long. One evening, about 2 years after I left the city, I was sitting on my deck watching the sunset when my phone buzzed. It was an email from someone named Samuel Price, a therapist at Aldridge Correctional. The subject line read, "Regarding Marcus Chen." My finger hovered over the delete button. Then I opened it. The email was brief. "Mrs. Chen, I'm writing to inform you that your son has been participating in our intensive rehabilitation program for the past 14 months. He's made significant progress in understanding his behavioral patterns and taking accountability for his actions. He's asked me to let you know that he's not ready to contact you yet. He says he needs to do more work first. He says he needs to become someone worthy of a conversation with you. I thought you'd want to know. Sincerely, Samuel Price, Ph.D." I read the email 3 times. Then I stood up and walked to the edge of the deck, looking out at the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Birds were calling to each other in the trees behind my house. The air smelled like salt and jasmine from my garden. I thought about Marcus, sitting in a prison therapy session, finally doing the hard work of looking at himself honestly. I thought about the boy he had been. The man he became. The person he might yet be. Then I closed my email and put my phone in my pocket. If Marcus wanted to change, truly change, I was glad. For him. For his own peace. But it wasn't my responsibility anymore. It wasn't my burden. I had spent 2 years in prison because of him. I had spent decades building a company he tried to steal. I had given him chance after chance after chance. Now, the work was his. The choice was his. The transformation, if it happened, would be his. I was done saving him. I was done waiting for him to become who I hoped he would be. I had finally learned what it meant to archive someone. Not to delete them from your life entirely, but to acknowledge they exist without giving them power over your present. Marcus existed. He was my son. Those facts would never change. But they also didn't define me anymore. I am Catherine Chen. I am 61 years old. I am a woman who built an empire, lost a son, survived imprisonment, and learned to walk away from people who couldn't love me the way I deserved. I am a woman who chose peace over vengeance. Who chose freedom over control. Who chose herself, finally, after decades of choosing everyone else. I forgive myself for not seeing Marcus's betrayal coming. I forgive myself for not being the perfect mother. I forgive myself for thinking love was enough to change someone who didn't want to be changed. I forgive myself for taking 2 years to learn that I couldn't save someone who was drowning on purpose. The sun finished setting. The stars came out. I went inside, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened a book I'd been meaning to read. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my home by the ocean. I would tend my garden. I would mentor someone who actually wanted to learn. I would live my life on my terms, finally free from the prison of other people's expectations and betrayals. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No nightmares about Willowbrook. No anxiety about Marcus. No rage about Elena. Just sleep. Deep, peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. The kind of sleep that comes when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. I am free. Not because I defeated my enemies. Not because I got revenge. But because I chose to walk away from a battle that had no winners. I am free because I learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's letting go. And I am finally, completely, letting go. I am Catherine Chen. And I am done fighting for people who never fought for me. I am done sacrificing for people who saw my love as weakness. I am done giving power to people who used it to destroy me. I am archived from that old life. I exist in a new one. And I am, at last, at peace. Hitting that archive button was the hardest thing I ever did. Harder than any business deal. Harder than surviving Willowbrook. Harder than facing Marcus in court. But sometimes you have to eject from a toxic situation to save your own life. If my story resonated with you, if you are currently fighting to find your own sky away from someone else's shadow, I want you to know, you are cleared for takeoff. Please hit that like button if you believe in choosing peace over ego. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories of resilience together. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever had to archive a family member to save yourself? I'll be reading your stories. This is Catherine Chen, signing off.